If I could, actually, my secretary is not here, so I will call roll. Mr. Ravitch. Here. Ms. Egger.
Here.
Mr. Rossetti.
Present.
Assumedly present. Mr. McBride.
Present.
Ms. Duhai.
Here.
Mr. Froman is out ill this evening, will not be attending. If I could have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that, ladies and gentlemen. If I could have the commissioners review the meeting minutes from our last meeting, make sure there's no typos, misspellings, any questions, comments, concerns, please bring them up.
A couple of corrections that we made, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
In the list of other attendees, you're listed as chairman, but so is Mr. Rich.
Well, he's listed as a lower seat chairman, so it doesn't count.
And also on the second page, Ms. Edgar is listed as the chair. We have 3 chair people. That should probably read the commissioner.
This is chair. Correct. Mr. Froman's date will not have any effect this evening. All right, with the exception of adjustments noted.
I'll make a motion to accept.
Second.
Ms. Duhai.
Aye.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Mr. Rossetti.
Aye.
Mr. Ravitch.
Aye.
Ms. Egger.
Aye.
I myself will vote aye. All right, our sole agenda item for this evening, new business, is a motion to recommend approval of the 2024 Village of Hampshire zoning map as required by state statute. Questions, comments, concerns on the zoning map as presented? Mr. Mo Khan, do you have any additional input or background on this?
The only change to zoning map from last year was the incorporation zoning for light properties up north. And then Miss Agarwal went out, of course, because their district got some more land, so that was shown on it, but that's outside of the village borders, so there's no zoning for that, it was just shown as a reference point.
Can I say something? Could I just ask that you guys speak up because there are older people here that may not be able to hear, so if you could please speak up.
Right.
I'm one of those older people.
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
Ms. Egger.
Yes.
Mr. Ravitch.
Aye.
Ms. Duhai.
Yes.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Thank you. Next agenda item is old business, a discussion regarding the proposed text amendments to the Village of Hampshire zoning ordinance. As a reminder, this is not an actual official vote this evening. This is a continuation of our last meeting discussion on the topic. I do feel also prudent that we need to address some social media influence. As presented, the ordinance proposals are containerizing for brevity some of the zoning. We are not eradicating F1. We are not eradicating or removing or eliminating farms. There is no impact to taxes. Zoning does not affect taxes. Taxes are defined by the improvements upon said properties. So as noted in our previous agenda item, discussion only, the brevity that is being looked for in updating the Village of Hampshire's 40-year-old codes is to just lump a lot of the zoning into like-kind containers. So this evening, item agenda number 6 is discussion only. This is not a vote. This is nothing that is binding that is being discussed this evening. And again, as a reminder, this does not affect anyone outside of the Village of Hampshire city limits. So if you live in the county, if you live in the township, nothing that is being discussed tonight or voted on in a future meeting will affect anyone outside of the city of the Village of Hampshire city limits. So there's no eradicating, there's no eliminating. F1 farming is not being removed, or I don't have an exact count, but to my understanding, there's fewer than 10 properties marked F1 inside the Village of Hampshire city limits. Tonight is just a discussion amongst the Planning and Zoning Commission members. There's no official vote on the topic. And even in the future, which you are invited to attend those meetings, that vote, whenever that time comes, nothing is being changed with the zoning other than the buckets in which they fit. So I would like to move forward with our discussion this evening for the proposed zoning amendments. Questions, comments, deliberation, concerns, continuation of our last meeting. Ms. Duhai, I believe there were some items that we had briefly discussed.
Sure.
The largest of which is, I think, the main and only difference between F1 and E1 is the number of cattle that you can have upon that property.
Yes, and in Hampshire's current zoning code, the only difference between an E1 zoning district and an F1 zoning district is livestock. E1 does not allow livestock. So if someone were to be annexed into the village who had livestock, it would be an F1 instead of the default E1. And the F1 requires that if they do have livestock, the number of heads does not increase after annexation. And if for some reason they stopped having livestock on the property for more than 90 days or so, then they would no longer have livestock allowed on that property unless they came back to the village. And through this, Planning and Zoning Commission asked for that to be reinstated. That is the only difference between an F1 and an E1 in Hampshire's current village code as written.
As defined in 1985.
Back in the 80s, yes. That's only upon annexation. Yeah.
I do apologize, Mr. Khan. Is there any further input you may want to provide?
So the question I have for the Planning and Zoning Commission is the designation that I provided in the new zoning district column. If the Planning and Zoning Commission had any thoughts on that, if they said, okay, this is good, maybe we need to change OM to a different district, have it as its own standalone. So I was looking for that feedback tonight, and if we need to discuss it for next month's meeting, we can do that. But just looking at what the new zoning districts are for those classifications, for those buckets, as you said, what's your thought process on that? What your feedback on that was? What the purpose for those districts were, if they make sense? If are there too many, not enough? So all that, because again, we're going to workshop this. It's not going to be in one thing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'm looking at a response that Village President Mike Reed put on Facebook in response to other comments. He said, tonight the proposal will include leaving F1 and F2 districts. Again, this was something always allowed, something that would continue to be allowed, but it would cause less confusion leaving F1 and F2 rather than allowing the farming/agriculture use in the E zoning district. The changes proposed are just an attempt to clean up our code. That being said, the recommendation to leave F1 and F2 will be included moving forward. That's Village President Mike Reed on Facebook. I'm sure some of you read that.
I'm sorry, to leave, does he mean like to get rid of, or to leave them? To leave, does he mean to get rid of, or to leave them alone?
No, he says in this, he says we're leaving F1 and F2 alone.
Okay, so we are not changing.
That's what,
F1 to
that's
E1.
the words of the village president.
I know, I'm just saying, I just wrote a note that we were talking about changing F1 to E1.
Correct,
We're
correct,
not doing that.
correct. According to village president Mike Reed, he wants to leave it alone.
So again, to clarify, Mr. Khan, we're not changing any of the zonings to any other types. We're just consolidating the overall categorization of the zoning. So the proposed E would still contain the sub-descriptions for E1, E2, E3, and F1, correct?
Yes,
Besides the Callaway, right? You said that was the exclusion?
The F1 zoning district, I do not believe we have an F2.
I
Just
don't
for
see that too on the
clarification.
map.
I believe King County
This
does,
is
but
Mike Reed,
it's
not
not in the village. F1, if you look at the village code, the only exception for F1 is livestock. That's the only difference between F1 and E1 currently is just livestock.
So,
So
That's a
the
big
F1,
difference.
This isn't- that's not
you want to be
a board.
if
affected.
I can.
We're not open for
jump
public
in.
comment, right, Mr. Chair?
Well, this is a discussion, and I'm willing to entertain some discussion as long as it's kept polite.
If I can
and-
jump in, I might.
Yes, sir.
Some confusion. When we combine, when staff, myself, said take E1, E2, E3, F1 together, is to take those uses and allow them under the new zoning designation. So it's consolidating 4 different zoning districts that have similar land sizes, similar land uses, and saying, under this new E district, you can allow everything that's allowed already in E1, E2, E3. So it doesn't say that you can't have cattle anymore, or you can't, you have to get rid of them. The other thing is if this goes forward, if you have an existing use, that use can continue as is in perpetuity. Even if you have a new owner of that property, it can continue moving on. So if you're a farmer, we're after one, and then we reclassify you to E, to estate, you can continue using your property as it is, and into the future until you decide to stop.
And this is the grandfathering clause that we've
Yeah.
heard so much about. And again, this only affects those properties already in the village property. This does
Correct.
not
This does not
affect Kane
affect
County, it
any
does not affect.
unincorporated property. I understand there's many properties that are unincorporated that have Hampshire as an address, but just because you have Hampshire, Illinois 60140, that does not mean you're in the village of Hampshire.
Point of clarification, can I ask?
Sure.
So you're actually saying that these zoning districts would become a new zoning district moving forward? So effectively, the city is really asking for a reduction in the amount of zoning districts, correct?
Correct.
So you're actually talking about the reducing and the reduction of the number of zoning districts. Maybe not in the past, but moving forward, it's still a reduction of zoning ordinances.
While retaining,
That's not true.
Wait, say that,
It's reducing the number of different zoning classifications. We're not reducing regulations or anything like that. We're reducing the number of zoning classifications. So we take E1, E2, E3 and make it E. We're reducing it by 2. And we're
Sure.
not removing regulations or uses and stuff.
they're all
like that.
still fitting within that, but now it's a singular thing.
Correct.
and the use case does
Okay.
not change.
Right.
But they're not increased, so like an MO to an M1 or OM to a M1. So an OM would not be increased by it now being M1.
What do you mean increased?
The
So
allowances of M1 now being.
are greater than what is currently in OM.
With this consolidation effort, I think this is just step one of these are the zoning districts being considered, and then the uses is a further discussion at a later time. This is just a general, do we agree with, let's go for businesses. We've got B1, 2, 3, and 4 is our current zoning code. We like the concept of reducing that to B1, B2, B3 with limitations to be discussed at a further date. It's just what's the scale we're starting with, and then we start adding into the scale.
But you understand there's a big difference between OM and M1, right?
In the
So-
current code, I agree. Yes, but
This is, oh, sorry. This is a new code classification system, correct? A
Yes.
new, or you're rewriting the entire ordinance moving forward, essentially.
Restructuring.
you're gonna rewrite it because you're gonna,
Right.
you're
We're
gonna,
consolidating.
Yes.
you're gonna consolidate into less. I just want to make sure I understand. We're gonna consolidate into less and then decide what fits into those less things, correct?
Yes.
So then by
That's what-
definition, it will
yes.
change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Town.
Should the staff memo dated January 22nd move forward and properties that are currently zoned F1, what would their new zoning classification be under this memo?
It would be E.
According to
And
the
is
village
that
president,
directly in,
she's just
contradiction
asking
to
about
a
this
Facebook
paper.
post?
Answering him. According to village president Mike Reed, he wants F1 left alone.
but
Right.
who makes the decision regarding zoning?
The village board,
Ordinance.
village board has final say in everything.
This Planning and Zoning Commission makes recommendations to the village board. Those recommendations are voted on or declined by the village board,
And does the president have a vote on the village board if there is not
Only
a
if there's
tie?
a tie.
only if there's a tie.
So what he's stating on Facebook, he may not actually be able to.
This is why I wanted to address the social media mis and disinformation. This is why I'm not fond of using social media to disseminate information. This is why these meetings exist. There's a lot of attendance this evening because of social media and the misinterpretation of even this evening's agenda items. So this is why I'm not fond of social media. This is why these meetings exist. So again, there is no official agenda item to be voted on this evening. I do appreciate the input. I think this has been a productive meeting thus far, both to and fro. I would like to continue on that. So officially, again, this Planning and Zoning Commission can make the recommendation as stated at a future meeting. We can also have further discussion as to whether or not social media takes any sort of germane stance in official meetings. I myself do not believe it does. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, not to get too far off the beaten path, if there's just my opinion, my input as a commissioner, if there's something that's just archaic, doesn't exist, it hasn't existed and we just go and get it off the books, makes perfect sense. If there are two zones that are a hair's breadth from each other and are basically redundant, I get it. I fail in the grand scheme of things to see how reducing the number of zones makes this a finer instrument. I would argue, unless I'm misunderstanding it, it makes it a more blunt instrument.
Understandable. Just as an example, you were alluding to our rural residential, rural business and recreational zones, which currently we have nothing actually zoned in those three at all.
Yes, in rural residential, rural business, there's no properties that are zoned, in the village.
As far as low hanging fruit go, those are obviously the ground level, as we might want to call it. Any other discussion? Ms. Duhai? Ravitch?
That was my lightning bolt epiphany for the day. That's all I got.
This question,
Yes.
I have a question. I did not understand, or this is a clarification. If my property is presently zoned F1, okay, and if I sell it to the gentleman over here, does it automatically change the zoning when he buys it from F1 to E1?
That depends on a few items. It depends on A, if you are inside the village city limits.
Not at this point,
So this does not impact you at all.
It does not impact you at all.
but
That one,
if
I
I
think if
was,
we go on
in-
with that, what you would have said if she said yes.
So if your property was in the city of, the village of Hampshire city limits, and you are currently zoned F1, the property would stay F1 unless that new property owner wanted to rezone. At that point, he or she would come in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission to request the rezoning. That would then go up through the village board. So again, nothing that's being discussed tonight or even voted on in the future affects anyone or your properties if you are not in the Village of Hampshire city limits. So if you are unincorporated King County Township, nothing that is being discussed tonight or is going to be voted on has any bearing on any of those properties. The only time that becomes relevant is upon annexation into the Village of Hampshire.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
So, I wanted to clarify what you said, because it sounded like you said the only difference going from F1 to E is that the number of livestock you can have cannot be increased.
And E1 does not allow livestock. And F1, it doesn't allow livestock.
So we
So
do
you're,
farming.
so it sounds
It's
like,
just general row cropping essentially.
Okay.
yeah, so that does make a difference, 'cause
Yes.
But the default, when a property is annexed into the village, the default
If I recall correctly.
assignment is an E1.
E1, under the current
Under
zoning.
current
But
zoning,
for those that are F1 currently now and have livestock, what happened?
Nothing.
you said nothing happens except you can't increase your number of head.
correct, that's how the current,
That is-
that's how the code currently reads. We haven't changed anything. That's just how it reads.
That's been that way forever.
Yeah, since the 80s.
But is it gonna matter, like, in that, like, when it happens to then? Because, I mean, herd sizes go up and down constantly, so is it gonna, like,
I would like to clarify though, the property that you're asking about, that you're concerned about, are you in the Village of Hampshire city limits?
yes,
Okay. So you're already in the Village of Hampshire. You're already, I'm assuming, zoned F1, correct? Okay.
So what would, nothing would affect, even if there's anything changes, say we change you to residential R1, you would still be allowed to continue your operation as is.
Under the grandfather
Your
clause.
grandfathered in. So even if you say, you know what, we think in 20 years, you're gonna sell off your land, it's gonna be subdivided to residential lots, you will be able to continue your operations as is in perpetuity. Now, if somebody buys your property and wants to change the use, then they would have to buy a return code. But you yourself would be allowed to use your property as is for however long you want to use it for.
So what if they wanted to make a change to the current property? Would they then have to follow the E1 zoning?
Yes,
So if you wanted to like build something on the land, it would have to be under E1. Is that correct?
The property owner would have to request the zoning change. So whether that's you or the subsequent owner of your
it
property,
changes your zoning.
that
It changes
change,
the zoning.
that annexation request would have to come from the property owner.
And that'd be the same for a business.
Correct.
So like if a business currently is under, I'm just making this up, B1, and they want to make it change to their lighting or whatever, they're changing the code, they would then have
They
to
would have to come in front of the village.
conform to the new zone, whichever. So like, let's say a business has an apartment above it, and with the new zoning, they can't. So they make a change to their lighting to the business. Now they can't rent out that apartment.
They would have to come to the village for a special use case or a variance, which is the exact same process as already established and would not change. Yes, ma'am.
We already have the existing E1, 2, 3, and we want to clump it in with the new zoning district. F1, all E.
The use cases would stay the same. They would just be all considered E.
Does this have any tax burden change at all?
No.
On homeowners?
So part of what's on that agenda is M3 and M2 get clumped together, correct?
Correct.
So as soon as you change zoning, anything that was in M2 can now, without a variance, do whatever was listed in M3 if we were to just keep everything status quo, correct?
M3 is the lower zoning.
It's the higher least restrictive. So as a business owner owning M2, I can now, without village's approval, conduct any M3 business.
No, because the uses have not been determined yet.
But if we were gonna go with how the uses are today, that's essentially, it's called upsizing and downsizing. That's what would happen if they were to stay status quo. Correct?
So if I can jump in, part of this process is to also evaluate the uses in the zoning districts to make sure that, we don't allow heavy industrial in a light industrial area. We want to be light industrial. So theoretically, what the gentleman is saying is correct, but that's not what this process is going to be. We're also going to evaluate the uses before we put them in the zoning districts.
What kind of checks and balances would be discussed for that sort of process?
Right, so it said that, there was a heavy manufacturer, keep it vague, whether that be a permitted by right in the M1, M2, or by special use in the M1, M2, that's gonna be, a discussion we're gonna have at the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately at the village board. So it's not just gonna be, this is gonna be a multi-step process. We're not just gonna adopt the zoning ordinance and just say, hey, we're done, we're gonna leave everything as is. The next step is gonna be looking at the uses and saying what uses should be in these different zoning districts.
But if you're eliminating M2 and OM, there's no place for them to go but up.
Not necessarily.
Well, like,
But a
for-
builder's gonna take advantage of that,
Yes.
and they're gonna go up.
Like,
Because
how
there's
in
no
terms of the
limit.
use, are you saying the use or?
the brackets haven't been set yet. We're just talking about, these are the buckets, we'll set the brackets later, like I'm just pulling an example out of the air, we're talking M2 and M3. Maybe the zoning changes to M2, but what used to be classified as acceptable in M3 may become a special use in M2 potentially. So those special instances where it's heavy manufacturing or something more disruptive, it would have to come back before this board before it'd be allowed on a certain property as a special use, hypothetically.
But we admit, Mr. Khan, you're creating less buckets.
Yes.
We're trying to clarify and
Yes.
consult. We have a
I
lot
think
of
just,
uses.
I
that
think
don't
just
make any
saying
sense.
less bucket and using phrases doesn't really capture the whole thing. Because again, it's a comprehensive process. So yes, I think if you say less bucket, you're correct on that, because we need a fewer number of designations. But that doesn't necessarily mean fewer regulations, people can just do what they want, because it's a multi-step process. And what you said, we're gonna do this first and then look at the uses next.
There's still checks and balances that are gonna be in place, because they're still gonna have to submit permits for whatever operations they're gonna be going through. They're still gonna have to go through whether or not that zoning meets everything, so they're still gonna be coming to us. They're gonna be going to community development for the permits of that business. So there's still checks and balances that are there that will be determining whether or not they're an appropriate fit for that location or not.
So it sounds like there's less buckets, but more special uses.
They don't know yet.
They don't know yet.
That hasn't been determined yet.
That's
That-
fair.
We don't know what that looks
They
like.
don't know the specificity of each bucket. The sheet that you guys were given was, hey, this is what the buckets could be, and this could possibly be what fits in the bucket.
And even in the future, it could change based off of things that happen. We may add another bucket back in because it doesn't fit with the way everything's laid out, correct?
Just,
Yeah,
Mr. Khan, how long until we could possibly have a draft of the zoning districts with the fine print verbiage?
a month, 2 months.
I have a quick question. How, I guess with the estate and the F1, how do we quite justify putting those in the same bucket? Because it's very different being a livestock or a farm, specifically livestock, versus being an estate. Like that, those are two very different buckets, and I don't see.
The general description is extremely large, single lot. That's the,
But the animal and the livestock and all that is kind of what is the tipping point of how that's not the same as an estate.
But we're still talking about that. We haven't figured out those uses yet. So while ideally we're looking at combining all those into an E, what those specificities for that hasn't been determined. So our current E1, you're not allowed livestock, right?
Right.
In your current F1, you are. So both of those will be subcategories in the new E.
So E would have a subcategory of
Or,
F1.
right, it would just be,
And then there's no new limits on how much livestock you can have
Well,
or.
hypothetically, it could be E is the zoning district. It's just E. We don't have 1, 2, 3.
I'm sorry.
So maybe it's just E. And maybe there's a property that was annexed in that has livestock, and livestock could be a special use within E. But it's on a case-by-case basis when that would be appropriate.
So we would all have to get a special use license then.
No. Any existing property would be as is, grandfathered in,
It would just
nothing
be
would
kept on
change.
land.
No need
Okay,
to-
so then I die and my kids take over my property, that doesn't.
Nothing
automatically when it changes, it still stays F1.
Correct.
Until it's a reasonable limit.
It doesn't say.
until a different use comes to play for that properry.
That's something you can force on us, or that's, we get to decide.
It's the
hey, we wanna
property
be-
owner.
Something
called forced annexation.
On the F1, you said that the livestock, the number of livestock cannot go up.
Can I read, this is from our code?
Please.
There shall not be an increase in stock by head count, and any stock use terminated for more than 90 days will not be allowed to resume in the future unless an application for a special use is heard by the Planning and Zoning Commission and approved by the Village Board of Trustees. That's how it's
Okay.
currently written.
Who counts? And at what point in time?
Right.
My understanding is that would be the code enforcement officer, which we actually, the village subcontracts that out to a third party. Generally, as with most ordinance complaints, such as things like RV parking, a lot of times those would actually only really come to fruition because of a complaining neighbor.
Yeah, what's happened in the last 50 years?
I mean,
That's the way the code's been for 40 years.
I don't know if we're talking the difference between 50 heads and 60 heads, or if we're talking about 50 heads going to 500 heads.
Mr. Khan, I think it would probably be most prudent, I think if we actually draft up the proposed zoning districts with the subcategorization, the verbiage that would be contained therein, I think would be easier for both this commission and the village board and our residents to discuss and actually review, as opposed to a lot of question marks and unknown futurisms. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question where it will say that if you're zoned estate, your taxes don't go up. Because farmers that are on 5 acres, some have been zoned estate, they may be paying 16,000 in taxes, say on 5 acre in a building.
Yeah.
And others that are zoned farm are paying 6,000. So the minute you tack on estate,
And again, I'd like to cut you off there. Again, that is a little bit of the distinction between the village of Hampshire, the township, and the
but
county.
there are people with farms, I'm assuming, still in the village of Hampshire.
And the Kane County Assessor's Office would be the person to answer those questions. My understanding, I don't want to say off the record, but it's usually the improvements on the property that dictate the taxes, not the zoning of the property.
Not necessarily.
But again, that's why I said the Kane County Assessor's Office would be the one to answer those questions.
But I think that's important for you to know, because
Yes.
if you do go from farming to estates, it could potentially,
That's
if it is zoning, that
Which
is what's
is
driving it.
why I appreciate this discussion and why I've recommended to Mr. Khan. I think as of our discussion this evening, it would be most prudent to take our time right through the proposed zoning districts with the subcategorization verbiage. I think that would be most ideal for the commission and the village board to discuss and the residents to review.
Can I make another suggestion?
Yes, sir.
Can the P and Z maybe do some community outreach to both residents and neighboring residents about and gather actual data as opposed to just assumptions, and actually engage the community for the betterment of the community, seeing how you're making decisions for the community?
Again, there is a fine line between the village of Hampshire and those that are not within the village of Hampshire.
Do it with the Village of Hampshire, whatever you see is again, like you said earlier, that none of this impacts anybody other than the village of Hampshire. And that's not accurately true. Our neighbors, right, and what our neighbors do have a direct impact on us and our community, just like country's neighbors have a
The
direct
zoning
impact.
the zoning that is discussed and voted upon in this board and ratified by the village board only affects those properties within the village of Hampshire.
Directly, but there's indirect relationships
Yes.
that you are ignoring.
That I'm not entirely sure fall under the purview of either this commission or the village board.
But it could.
If there are neighboring civil discussions or disputes, that is not a matter for this commission nor the village board.
You have an opportunity for outreach.
Chairman Roth, may I ask a question, please?
Yes, ma'am.
If a business is currently zoned before, and again, referring to the staff memo of January 22nd, if you were to follow these guidelines, would that property that is zoned B4, would that property zoning change to B3?
Under the proposed discussion at a future time, it is possible, yes.
That's what this memo is suggesting happen.
So if I can jump in, Chairman, well, what the third step of this process is to look at the properties and figure out what the best zoning for those properties are. So it's not, so if it's B4, it could be B1, because that's the best zoning that after discussion, we determine that's, the best zoning. And then if those properties are going to be changing zoning, by law, we're required to notify them. So then they're made aware of this before any changes are adopted. Or maybe no changes are made, and the planning zone commission or the village board say, you know what, we disagree, we think we should keep it as is. But if there's any zoning changes for a property, we're legally required to notify them of when it goes to the planning zone commission for formal action.
Part of the problem, I feel like, is we're looking at these proposed consolidations or changes, and we're overlaying the current property uses, which is not going to exist. Correct me.
State that, I'm sorry.
We're overlaying the current property uses over the existing zone. So when we consolidate, we're worried that what was in blankety blank is now going to automatically be in this lesser one that affects me or affects my neighbor or what have you. So we don't know what those property uses are going to be as associated with the new zoning definitions.
Correct.
Or zoning letters.
Yeah.
So it's hard right now to forecast because there's a huge piece of this puzzle that's missing. And all we're doing is, like I say, kind of overlaying existing stuff.
So
Yeah.
that's not what the memo indicates though, because the memo indicates that that there is a new zoning district, giving it the same name as what currently you have, which is very confusing because to say OM and M1 are now going to become M1, according to this memo, totally makes it look like that.
But he has reiterated that this is just
So that's
preliminary.
why, that's what I'm saying. That's the confusion, I think, why we're all
Yes, but
like
he
going,
keeps
well, what about that?
repeating this.
And we can't answer it.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So, Mr. Khan, do you think most prudent moving forward, I think we can start drafting the actual proposed zoning districts, keeping F1 separate, and then include the verbiage as to be discussed at that later meeting?
Mr. Can we make sure we align with Urban Land Institute's designations for these acronyms, just so it's a little bit more
Uniform.
consistent, uniform with other communities
Yeah.
and people are doing research?
Yep, we can do that.
Yes.
Where, no, you, I'm sorry, what's your name?
Grace.
Grace? Where,
They compared to, like,
where can I find the
information that you had, that you were reading about the livestock, and where would that be? Where I can, like, look at it?
If you just do a Google search for Village of Hampshire ordinances, they are publicly available.
Or even just Village of Hampshire zoning?
Where would I find that specific? I mean,
You can
spent-
go- you
I
can go to
spent
the
hours
website.
looking.
Yeah, the
There's
Village of
a
Hampshire,
page yesterday.
Village of Hampshire website has a link to the ordinances.
Which ordinance was it? Greg?
Here's one thing that I'd like to bring up.
Which one
Said
is that
with
she
the
spoke
livestock,
It's Article,
I'll email it.
it's been this way for a long time. But as fast as things are changing, and if you guys aren't here in 10 years, and you know, somebody's gonna come in that's, say, from Barrington and doesn't like cows, and they're like, you raised it by one head, and you're violating the law. That's what I'm worried about. It's too subjective.
But that's not determined by them. That's determined by our code enforcement officer, which looks at that. So that.
Which has been in
So when I
place.
asked the question, how many and at what point in time do they get counted? I got a very subjective answer. Respectfully, I understand. But you said, if it goes from 50 to 60, no big deal, I think was essentially what you were saying. But to someone else, if you get hit by a bus tomorrow and you're not here in 5 years, that could be a big problem for somebody.
The code is posted on the village website, and that code has not changed.
But
And it is not,
that doesn't
it's not an
change.
agenda item for this evening.
But respectfully, that doesn't answer my question. I asked who's counting and at what time, and I did not get an answer for that. And I think that's very important.
The village contracts a third-party code enforcement agency, which enforces the village ordinances, which are posted publicly.
Okay, so it is gonna be, it's counted at a certain time, and that's all the head you're allowed. That's what we should understand from this meeting.
As the ordinance has been written and on the books for almost 40 years, that is my understanding, yes.
Okay. And we don't know at what point in time. I mean, if somebody sells all their cattle, but they plan to raise 50 head a year, and they come and account after they just sold them, that's gonna be a huge problem.
Yeah, that was where my question came from, because those numbers go up and down constantly throughout the year. I do understand that that's the current thing, but especially when you say there's only 10 F1 properties left, I think that makes it even a bigger of a deal, because if farmers start retiring, and a lot of times they'll sell their livestock before they retire, and someone purchases new, then then they essentially.
But again, I would like to clarify that that ordinance has been on the books for decades.
But I thought it was an issue.
Okay.
I'm just saying that.
That is something that
can we take this as an opportunity potentially?
I am taking copious notes.
Yeah, maybe we need to add something.
Yeah, let's take
sort
this
of
as
range.
an opportunity, we've heard that we want to keep
I
F1.
I understand.
Maybe we can add some more clarifications while
Bear
we're
with
going
me
through the
here.
process.
So thank
So
you.
as far as the old business, the discussion, Mr. McBride.
It's
Question over here.
Excuse me. As far as the discussion, do the commissioners feel that we have had ample enough discussion amongst ourselves?
I have something to say.
Yes, sir.
If there was something that we've been trying to jam into an existing zone that really didn't fit any of them, I don't know, a hypothetical logistics center. Is it possible to create something from scratch? To create a zone for, again, something that has been sort of eluding us for a couple years?
That would be under the purview
Could
of
we
the planning and zoning commission, yes.
slip it into a recommendation or something, at least just something to think about?
But again, this is discussion, and I think we've actually had a productive discussion this evening. We do have people that have signed up for official public comment. So as far as the old business, the planning and zoning discussion, is there any further questions or comments from the planning and zoning commission?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Khan, who do we have signed up to speak first?
Thank you. I apologize if I butcher your name, Roy Kissinger.
All your discussions, I think some of my questions have been answered. But me as a business owner in town and owning property, being zoned B1, right now, if you read the way it is, it includes auto repair. And that would be changed to B1, but here you get neighborhood commercial. So I guess basically, I'd like to see what you get proposed to be in B1, because if you go and you read the way it is right now, B1 does have auto repair and stuff like that. And there's at least 4 businesses in town that are B1 with automotive services in that. When you also have down here B4 and comes B3, where it says purely auto oriented gas stations, et cetera.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Gahn, next.
Carol Ford.
Q-U-A-N-D-T?
Yeah.
That's me. I think my questions have been answered. Is there anybody else that needs my time? I yield it to them.
Thank you, ma'am.
You did a good job answering and clarifying for me. Thank you.
And Walt Ford.
Excuse me, I can't get up with it. I have, one is going back to the 2000 decade when all the developers, the Hampshire plan also included, I believe it was a 1.5 mile radius beyond the city borders. And that they had already selected what the zoning would be in that area. I don't see that up on the map up here. Has that been out the window? Or
Are you speaking of the long-term comprehensive plan that was ratified in 2004 and updated in 2008?
Yeah, that could be.
Okay, so the long-term comprehensive plan is a plan that is generally worked on by most villages to try to define some sort of target, some sort of future goal for the village. Kane County has one as well, the 2040 plan and the 2050 plan. There are a lot of prospective and proposed plans that are put to paper, but a lot of times those comprehensive plans obviously do change. Industries change, economies change, the market, et cetera. Bubbles occur. The village does need to update the comprehensive plan, and that is something that is being discussed to update that long-term comprehensive plan to bring it more into alignment with 2030, 2040, 2050 plan. But there is nothing that is official in that comprehensive plan. There's nothing that's been officially ratified or annexed.
No, it was just a plan.
Yes,
Okay, and that plan is still in existence.
correct. And it is publicly available on the village website.
And I'd like to make one other clarification on farmland. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, back in the 1980s, went through and assessed a piece of farmland by the soils and the number of bushels of corn that plot now would raise. So that is how the value was established, rather than like in a town, you establish your value by what the last sale of the house was. I don't know if any of you people are involved in agriculture, but that is the way the farmland is evaluated, except for 1 acre around the house. That's evaluated the same as you people in town evaluate. Just for clarification.
Thank you.
Mary Flaherty. Sorry.
My name's on that list because I thought it was just a sign up sheet.
Yeah,
So,
it happens all the time.
but thank you though.
Barbara Burden.
I don't think you need me to get up there. My voice can get coyotes to howl. So the last thing I wanted to do was be here tonight. The voice is on, Antiques Roadshow. I just had 2 surgeries in the last 3 weeks. I think you kind of answered my questions too, except for I'm still concerned about the people that are involved with the farms. If they're put into a state zoning, their taxes are going to go up, I believe. And it's not going to have anything to do with the county or anything. When you're in a state, you pay higher taxes than people that are zoned agriculture or farming. And that was like I said, now, I know none of you people have lived on farms or anything. But it's very concerning to the people that, I'm talking for a couple that are 80 years old and they're being surrounded by, the subdivisions now. If they're zone farming and they're surrounded on all sides by, say, a subdivision, will they be put into the estate part because they would be part of the village then? Because even though they're zone farming, they're surrounded on all sides by a subdivision. And another question I have is like Crown with Oakstead and Prairie Ridge, all the years that they were empty, they did nothing with the property. I assumed they were getting farm status even though they weren't farming the properties. And I would have thought maybe the village could have been making some money off of them for years. Just my opinion. I'm the horrible person that went on the media and got you all here, so.
Well, thank you.
It's a public meeting, you want to have the public here.
Well, yes, people that there was a meeting in public.
Mr. Khan?
John Schaefer.
I timed it, so it should be under 5 minutes. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I would like to give you a little bit of background information about myself before I start, if I may. I was born and raised in Crystal Lake, just up the street. I remember when Algonquin and Randall Road was a four-way stop sign with one gas station.
Yep.
I've lived in, my grandfather served on the P&Z for numerous years as Crystal Lake Road. I've lived in Chicago, both North Side and South Side, for the other half of my life, and have been exposed to the politics and realities of living in a major urban setting. My old next door neighbor is a state representative as well. My wife and I chose to move back out this way to raise our family, 2 girls, 6 and 5. Not unlike many that have moved and are currently preparing to move here. I am very interested in creating a community that not only I am proud of, but that they will be proud of as they grow up. Just like I am proud having grown up in Crystal Lake. I attend other meetings and I visit other municipalities. Sorry, I'm not your adversary. I am an educator by profession, but more importantly, I'm a lifelong learner. I do not accept the first and only answer presented as truth, but as an invitation to investigate a problem issue for myself. I know that ignorance is a dangerous thing, and people with money and power will take advantage and manipulate those that are not in the know. They do not want true transparency and try to avoid difficult conversations because it is not in their best interests. I've seen it in big cities and in little towns. They will hide behind the bare minimum, never going above and beyond when they have the opportunity to do so. I have witnessed responsible, sustainable growth, and I have witnessed irresponsible and unsustainable growth. I have seen the negative impacts of irresponsible community management. Those impacts last for multiple generations, if not in perpetuity. Sorry. I urge all of you to go and visit other municipalities and attend their meetings. I urge all of you to speak with them about transparency and educate yourself on what are best practices for engaging and managing a community. You have to do this for yourself. Nobody will do it for you. I would hope you feel an obligation to the community to be the most educated that you can be on every decision you make. Yes, every decision. And yes, it's that important. Now I want to draw your attention to a pressing issue that has the potential to significantly impact the fabric of Hampshire and its surrounding communities. The reduction in zoning classifications, which is exactly what they're proposing, a reduction in zoning moving forward. While streamlining regulations may seem like a positive move on the surface, I want to inform you that it could have detrimental effects on our community. Zoning classifications are the backbone of an urban-suburban planning, serving as a crucial tool to manage growth, protect neighborhoods, and maintain the unique character of different areas within a city. However, the current discussion of reducing these classifications risks sacrificing the diversity and identity that make Hampshire vibrant, dynamic, and a desirable place to live. Most of us live here. We don't work here.
One of the primary concerns with the reduction in zoning classifications is the potential for unchecked development. Zoning regulations are designed to balance the interests of property owners with the broader needs of the community. By simplifying these classifications, we risk opening the floodgates to haphazard development that may prioritize short-term gains over the long-term well-being of our neighborhoods and city. Furthermore, diverse zoning classifications play a pivotal role in fostering a sense of community. It erases the charm and personality that drew us to our homes in the first place. While the idea of reducing zoning classifications may be driven by a desire for simplicity and efficiency, we must not overlook the potential consequences for our city's future. We need a thoughtful and nuanced approach to planning that values the uniqueness of our neighborhoods, fosters community cohesion, and addresses diverse needs of the residents. Advocate for a city that grows sustainably, preserves its character, and remains a place we are all proud to call home. I submit several articles for your consideration. List of issues resulting from a reduction in zoning classifications: increased density congestion, impact on property values, quality of life, strain of public services, loss of community character, environmental impact. You can read the rest. Here are a list of cities deemed by many to be well organized: Naperville, Evanston, Arlington Heights, Oak Park, Schaumburg, Downers Grove, Glenview, Hinsdale. What do we get? Itasca. Sorry, Itasca, if you're watching. List of reasons why having an updated long-term plan is crucially important before implementing or revising any zoning. Before CMAP, updated plan, and a study from 2022 entitled Location, 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 Manufacturing and House Price Growth, which shows manufacturing exposure predicts shifts in both cross-region and within region inequality in house prices, not just in my backyard, but the town of Hampshire itself. I urge all of you to do your due diligence and explore more than what is presented to you. Understand the risks and rewards of upzoning and downzoning, which is what Mr. Khan has proposed from city staff. Because you're being asked to do that as well. Ask meaningful questions, get direct, specific answers to your questions, and have high expectations for Hampshire and those that you work with for the betterment of the town as it continues to grow. If any would like to speak with me more on issues being discussed and presented, I would be more than grateful for the opportunity. And I know I'm one voice, but I am a voice. Thank you for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Khan? Or Ms. Ross signed up to speak?
Yes, I've heard enough.
Okay, thank you, sir.
What's the plan? Well,
Stay back there. I just have a couple of questions. What, I guess, what is like, I mean, you said we're just kind of trying to trim the fat and shove everything together. What's the, I guess, betterment and purpose of trying to shove the farming district, so to speak, into the estate? Why is that something that, it looks like apples and oranges to me, and I don't understand why we're.
Again, the general premise was the like-kindedness of the zoning itself. The E1, the E2, the E3, extremely large single lots. That is the commonality amongst those zoning districts. Regardless of the use of the property, the extremely large lots is the key phrase in that proposed
So
zoning
what's the
district.
benefit to, yeah, putting the like line? That's a benefit.
As Mr. Schaefer said, it is streamlining, that is the goal, is to streamline the code, as opposed to having 21 separate.
Kind of removing one, you just turn it into the other.
Not really turn them into anything else, just put the squares with the squares, apples with the oranges,
Oh,
et
yeah,
cetera.
that's, I guess I just don't understand how those are not apples and oranges, just because they're both large lots of land, they're completely different uses. Like, completely different uses. Having livestock and getting up every day, no matter what, and taking care of those is completely different from a different person that gets up and has 2 acres and somebody that comes and mows their grass. What I do is
absolutely nothing comparable to somebody that just has a large lawn.
I think what she's saying, what's the benefit of combining them? Why not take what's existing and rewrite the purpose? Leave them at the 2021, we'll have it on either R, and then just rewrite the purposes.
Well, and again, that's, I think, what would be most prudent is to, as I've discussed with Mr. Khan, if we can actually get the zoning districts as proposed with the subcategorization verbiage, I think that would clarify a lot of the questions that really can't be answered this evening.
If we get subclassified into E, does that open us up to eventually you guys having easier out to, oh, well, E is gonna be rewritten and, oh, nobody realized that F is now under E, so we rewrote it. But it's basically, Mr. Schaefer, I think, kind of said it, that one groundwork gets laid and then it goes kind of under the table and then we come back a few years later, rewrite everything and everything kind of slowly gets absorbed. Everybody here doesn't really know that E is now farming and that they need to come to the city zoning meeting for E because we didn't realize that we got absorbed into F. And slowly the members that are here dwindle and dwindle for the confusion of what you guys put forward by bundling farms with estates. Most people wouldn't think 10 years from now if this happens when they say there's a estate, you know, or a E zoning meeting happening that, oh, I need to be there because I have a farm. And I'm in an estate zone.
Can I just save you time? I'm gonna ask Mr. Khan a question. Does staff recommend that F1 stay the same?
Yeah, at this point, based on the feedback and internal discussion we had, we're gonna keep F1 as is. And leave that as its own category.
Okay, so that solves all this problem, doesn't it?
The short answer was there was no benefit, come to find out. Maybe.
I don't even know why it was in there in the first place. So there's your, we're not always in agreement. We all think that we're the bad guys sometimes, but that's not the case. That's why.
That was, Mr. Khan?
It's tax wise different, they're not, it's a totally different, department, but can we get clarification for next meeting? Like, is someone's taxes gonna go up if they are?
So that's so what I can do is contact the assessor, for assessing property and property taxes and get those.
And that's a discussion we can have after the meeting. I think it probably would be best to have possibly a guest speaker at one of our next meetings to answer some of those questions. Next on the list, Mr. Khan?
Next is Kathleen Carr.
I know it's been a long evening, so I'll try to make this as concise as possible. I do have to admit, though, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to understand why the city of Itasca zoning map has been included in the agenda packets for all of your meetings this year. I simply don't understand the reasoning, or honestly, what comparisons can be drawn between the two municipalities. In search of the answers, I set out last Tuesday, February 20th, with the intention of having lunch in Itasca and trying to understand why their city's zoning map is included in a staff memo regarding the changing of zoning classifications of our village. In search of a sit-down restaurant in downtown Itasca, I noticed several places for residents to get their hair cut, do their banking, or attend religious services. I also viewed many large multifamily housing units and a large municipality center. What I simply could not find was a community-focused restaurant. Our town is blessed with several family-friendly restaurants. These restaurants, I would argue, are at the heart of our community. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that hundreds of multi-generation Hampshire born and bred families have spent thousands of hours creating wonderful memories within the brick and mortar structures that make up our downtown area. 4 generations of my own family have enjoyed many meals on State Street. If I'm understanding the zoning map that you just approved correctly, and the zoning of the current restaurants along State Street, in addition to many other businesses, would have their zoning changed should you opt to proceed with the staff memo contained in tonight's agenda packet. These restaurants that have literally nourished our families through no fault of their own would have their zoning downgraded, so to speak, from B2 to B1. To what end, I do not understand. What works in DuPage County may not work in Kane County, nor would we want it to. In addition to businesses along State Street having their zoning changed, owners of land that are currently zoned F1 would also have their zoning changed, according to that staff memo. If I'm grasping the situation correctly, should this proposal be approved, all property zoned F1 farming would be unilaterally rezoned to E estate. I have been instructed that this directly contradicts the plans and policies of Kane County, the Kane County 2040 plan, and the CMAP plan for our area. In fact, if I'm remembering correctly, this commission has discussed using grant money from CMAP. So it seems like any decisions that are made should be in keeping with the opinions of this well-respected planning authority. I respectfully disagree that the decisions that are made within this commission only affect village residents. We strive to live in harmony, village residents and township residents. As a certified planner told me just this afternoon, the tone of development that is set by your commission affects all residents that live within 1.5 miles of your borders. For the last 179 years, farmers have been the cornerstone of this community. I would argue that farm families are the sole reason that this community exists today. The elimination of the F1 zoning district is shocking, and in my opinion, does not honor the hardworking farmers that have come before us and currently reside within our community. As the village motto is, embrace opportunity, honor tradition, I request, and it seems like this request may be answered, that you honor the rural tradition that is the very fabric of our community by keeping the F1 zoning district in our community. As you as Planning and Zoning Commission members are well aware, and a well-respected Kane County official recently said to me, zoning is necessary to protect the health, safety, and morals of its citizens. In my opinion, and I would argue in the opinion of the citizens here tonight, the proposed zoning district changes do not in any way do a better job of protecting the health, safety, and morals of the citizens of our community than what is currently in place.
Agreed.
Please consider tabling this item agenda until additional research can be done with regards to the transportation, economic, and environmental impacts of such radical changes to our zoning districts.
Thank you.
David Deba,
I'm good. Everything's answered.
Christine P. Elsky,
I just wanted to say that even on the website, looking at the very purpose of the ordinances is to promote the public health, safety, comfort, morals, convenience, and general welfare. And I think that you are hearing from many of us tonight that we do not believe that the change in the zoning categories is to that purpose. I also kind of take offense to your statement that these things do not affect those outside of the actual village boundary. I live on Dietrich Road, and what we have been fighting for 1.5 years for, it clearly looks like this opens the door to what we were trying not to have happen.
Exactly.
And our voices were very clear to all of you that this is not what is wanted in our community and in our neighborhoods. I run the ranch of Hope Rains. We serve this community. We serve the most vulnerable and hurting in our community. And if that happens on the corner of Dietrich Road and Route 20, our business will be ruined. It will destroy that organization that serves this community. It's painful to hear you say that.
Yeah, Steve Bergen, sorry, can.
Steve Bergman. Basically, everything I wanted to say was said, but I just want to clarify one thing. 2 years ago, the assessor mislabeled the 14 acres next to my house and said that it hadn't been farmed, and I had to prove to them that it did. The taxes went up almost 300% between the fields and now them considering it an estate. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood. Thank you.
Laurel Reed.
Well, I have no notes, and everyone eloquently spoke prior to me and did a very good job. Couple of things to just make you aware of. In 98 or 99, Larry, the people on Kelly Road and several other roads suddenly were changed from ag to estate. The taxes went up.
They doubled.
With no knowledge that this was happening. The tax bills arrived and we were changed. We had to prove that we were doing agriculture activities. So the taxes do go up when you go to a state. That's what we
We
were.
end up spending a ton of money on lawyers because they had to take it all the way to state of Illinois to get sold back to ag.
So this is the history that made you understand why this is upsetting to this group of people, because we've seen these things abused before. As far as your analogy of buckets, and we're not going to talk about what's in the bucket, we're just going to have these empty buckets. I think what we've all been saying is you can't just ask people to make decisions or to understand that you're presenting an empty bucket. You have to show us what's in the bucket. And then the other thing that I'm sure you're aware of, but perhaps you forgot, the village logo happens to have something modern, but it is a picture of a farm on it for the village of Hampshire, not the township, the village of Hampshire. It embraced farming by putting it on its logo. And we know that these developers are very enticing with what they offer the town and all the things that they can bring. I would like to say that most of the people that are coming out here are not to have replicas of little suburban tracts. They're coming out for the farm influence and the open country and the open air and people that respect the land and treat the land right. So you may be cutting off your nose to spite your face if the end game of this, and I'm not saying it is to change all the zoning so you can get more heavy development and all these kinds of things. I think you need to remember the roots of Hampshire is farming. And there are many of us that still do it. Maybe not on the biggest scale, but people appreciate it. Barb Burton has people commenting on her donkeys all the time about how they love to drive down Big Timber Road. They're so happy to see her donkeys. Those are the people that are going into the subdivisions, but they are happy to see that the roots of farming are still available and visible. So I just ask that you remember that, and I'm not criticizing anyone. I hope you don't take offense to my comments, but just some things to think about. And thank you to everyone else who did speak well that day.
Yeah, Pat, DEYOE.
I think it's me. I thought it was a sign-up sheet also. I would like to say, thank you very much. You guys have opened up this meeting for public opinion. I think you guys have rocked it. And I think you've done a great job explaining it. And I greatly appreciate all that you've done and all that you will continue to do and all the suggestions that were made. I know you'll take them into account. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I can't read the last name. PA. Oh, yeah. So, road, 46 West 484.
Oh, it's 46W44?
Yeah, 46 West 484.
I didn't know what I was getting into tonight. I was seeing patients today, and I get a phone call.
be at the meeting tonight because they want to change their property to an estate. And that just rose radar, all up because I went through this back in 19. I remember when I was walking the roads, getting petitions signed. I don't have a big farm. I have a farmette. And I have a barn on that farmette that I found out recently it's going to be added to my property as an additional building because, you know, whatever. I don't know how to assess it. I have a fella that farms my property. That's all I can say. I didn't move here to have an estate. I could have gone to Barrington for that. I came here because I like the openness, I like the farming, I like everything about Hampshire. But when they say you have an estate, that just roused me up. So I wasn't prepared to talk. I just signed that little thing and thought, well, that's an attendance record, but since everybody that's there is here, I'm here. So, I take care of people's brains. I don't do this, but I do have a farmette. And the fella that farms it right now, I think we're going to go to corn because last year we were soybeans. So I'm just hoping, somebody told me, at that meeting, they want to change your property, whatever assessment. Oh, no. So that's my little spiel, and I do appreciate everybody that's given. There's a few of you are Kelly Road people, so, and I know the farmers here too. So I love Hampshire. I don't want to keep it as Hampshire is, which is rural. But I'm on the unincorporated. I'm on the north side of Kelly Road. So, but thank you all.
I believe from the same address, Mike.
I think a lot of the dumb ones thought they were sign-up sheets.
No.
Maybe it was the smart ones.
Just want to make sure, Bill, from the same?
Same.
Okay, sounds good. All right, that's it.
Sir, can I add an educational note?
Why not?
Okay. People that are sitting in your chairs when Brown, Van Glushigen, Pasquinelli came into town. Their annexation was approved. It was approved as a PUD, Planned Unit Development. And as long as they kept row crops on it, they would be assessed as agricultural property under the scheme that I told you that U.S. Department of Agriculture uses. But just add that on as a educational note, because since they first came in and did their thing, things have changed. Now, when they take up the property that they have, they come back to you when they want to carve out a little section and they ask you for zoning. And that was the proper way it was done. But again, it was brought in as a PUD and it was taxed as row crop farm.
And they have not farmed.
And it had to be farming, and it had to be row crop. But a story of a friend that when they put in, the farmer couldn't get to it, and they put in she couldn't get it done, so then she went to forestry.
Is that all the signups
Yep.
this evening, Mr. Khan?
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you very much. All members of the public signed up to speak this evening. I have no official announcements. I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:22.
Oh, I was supposed to turn that in.
Well, you can make a motion.
Oh, I make a motion.
I forgot to submit something for you guys, so before you close. Sorry.
Can you give me the source?
Mr. Rabbit?
Which specific? Sure.
Ms. Egger?
Give you a whole bunch of stuff. I'll email it.
Mr. Rossetti?
Okay. There's one article.
We're voting on adjournment. How do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. McBride? Ms. Duhai?
Yes.
Thank you very much.